Hey everyone, so I'm a very critical person, and I've noticed that there are basically no, non-loser fascist takedown videos of Disco Elysium, at all. And this isn't going to be like a Disco Elysium is a bad game video at all. I just am someone who really likes negatively criticizing things, and I basically hate it whenever I see games, only ever get glazed and complimented for being incredibly written and stuff like that, even when there are at least some valid critiques. And I love Disco Elysium. I think it's an amazing, incredibly written game, all of that stuff. But I do have some critiques, and I have a YouTube channel, so why not share them? Not my usual content, but basically nothing is at this point. So yeah, I'm just gonna go through a short list of criticisms that I have so that they're out there and people can yell at me and say that I completely missed the point of the game despite them being opinions. But anyway, so my biggest problem with the game overall is probably just that there are definitely a few points where I feel like it wants you to be Harry, the established character, much more than it wants you to be your own personal version of Harry who wakes up after he loses his memory and everything. And yes, this is more vibes based, but I feel like there are a lot of points in the game that really don't take into account how you've been playing it, especially when it comes to the sober route, the I'm not going to take drugs route, the I really want to improve myself as a person type of route. Because there's a lot of sorry cop options and stuff like that, which partially get you on that track. But I feel aside from just giving you sorry cop points, there really isn't much to that side of the game at all. There are a lot of points, especially at the very end, when you meet Harry's posse and everything, and you're getting roasted right at the end of the game, where Harry just is barely able to defend himself at all. That's basically what Kim and Kuno have to do if they're there. And to a certain extent, I understand that point of the game specifically. It was more about the player getting judged based on how they've approached the game so far, but Harry as a character is still present for that. He's not really able to describe that much of how and what he's done. You can mention once having gone sober. Kim has one quote where it's well, he hasn't drank alcohol this entire week or anything, but there just isn't that much of that in a lot of conversations. You can't really bring up certain things you've done. And I understand for sure, there are so many things to do in the game. There are so many conversations you can have. There are so many flags that already exist in the game. There are so many possible things that the player could do. There would be a million more conversations basically if everything could be taken into account. But I do think that especially considering how outspoken Harry is and how much of a driving force he is with the characters and with the narrative as a whole, it doesn't really make sense for him to be very weirdly quiet and impersonal in a lot of parts of the game. And the biggest example is probably, and I know a lot of people are going to get super mad at this and say that I'm missing the point, but I'd say the dream with Dolores at the very end of the game, in the Sea Fortress, is probably the point that I wasn't upset or anything, because again, Harry's an established character. This is a nightmare he's been having long before the events of the game happened. I get it's supposed to be he's very defeated and he can't defend himself. And the most important thing, I'm fine with Harry losing the conversation, Dolores always leaving him no matter what. It's a loop. It's supposed to be a vicious cycle type of thing. I completely understand that. But the fact that you're able to try to do things and say things to win Dolores over that have to do with the events of the game, but you're barely, if at all, able to get into the positive things that you've done and changed when you're talking to her. Especially considering that dream only happens if you go into the church and try to make things better for the people trying to start a club there and everything. I don't know, it just seemed really weird to me that Harry is basically just a fumbling moron throughout that conversation, even if it is a nightmare that you're not supposed to be able to win. I feel it would have been way more consequential and impactful if Harry was able to say a bunch of good things that he's done, smart ways he's proceeded with the investigation, etc. And yet Dolores would basically shoot them down or minimize them, or the skills would be do you really think that's going to work, stuff like that. Because then it's yeah, Harry has done a lot of great things, but they're not enough, and they're never going to be enough. You are never going to be enough. But again, the game doesn't really let that stuff happen. So the next problem that I have with the game is just that this isn't serious, but I went on the communist route because in a game where I have to be a communist, a fascist, a mega strawman libertarian, or a radical centrist, I'm obviously going to choose to be a communist. And the game's sense of humor is very funny the game's writing is very intelligent, but I feel like the game uses the whole like communism hasn't been tried, it doesn't actually exist, and communism is all about arguing with other communists. Like, I feel like it does those jokes a bit too often. Like, they are funny when they happen and everything, but it kind of got into, like, you guys have one joke territory a few too many times. Like, the Communist Vision quest is really good for the most part, but I also don't think it was necessary to be, like, this one guy is just like a follower, and the main guy who like established the reading group is like the actual leader, and that's like really hypocritical. Like, I don't know, I felt like a lot of the communist jokes were like a little too much, and I'm not a communist in real life, so it's not like I was offended or anything. I just feel like they could have been more creative with it in general. Like, another problem I have with the game is that, like, especially in like the midpoint of the like main story, like the murder investigation, I feel like things just get like really, not like, embarrassing sounds a little too like rude, but they're just kind of embarrassing. I'm just gonna be honest about it. Like, I don't think it was necessary for you to have to like go talk to the Hardy Boys, then go talk to Klassia, then go talk to the Hardy Boys, then go talk to Klassia, and then again like 2 or 3 more times. I think that's really cringe, especially since they're in the exact same location. It, like, I understand that's how investigations work a lot of the time. You're getting like more information either way, but like, and this isn't me trying to be like I'm super five head or anything, but like, I found the secret bullet like on both of my playthroughs. I just beat my second one like a few days ago. And I feel like, hindsight is definitely 2020, but like even on my first playthrough, I was able to be like, okay, it doesn't make sense that the Hardy Boys are concealing the fact that he got shot unless that's the reason why the victim was killed and they didn't have anything to do with that. But like, you literally need confirmation that the Hardy Boys like didn't do it. They need to admit to it and everything. And like, again, I understand it's a murder investigation. They kind of need the admissions and like things like that in order to proceed in certain ways. But like, let's also not act as though the game or like Harry is like that honorable of a person. Like, yes, you have like the honor stat, but you don't need to be an honorable cop at all, and the game knows it like very well. And also, like, it's not even dishonorable to like proceed under certain assumptions, like, especially because you can easily like do that in a murder investigation and be like, okay, if this gets disproven, then that's fine, we're just going to proceed with this, like, just in case, like. And I know that it like makes sense why they wouldn't write the player making like that assumption or like a million others, because you can make like a million different like assumptions or proceed in like a million different ways in a murder investigation like that. It's understandable why they wouldn't want to have like a billion branching paths in their game or anything. But I feel like there are a few points like that where there definitely could have been like actual branching paths, and they just didn't do that. And again, like, the fact that you go back and forth from the Hardy Boys to Klassia as if there aren't like a million other characters who they could have involved with the investigation and like kept things moving along instead of feeling as though you're just like trapped in a stasis. Like, I don't know, I feel like they easily could have done that while still keeping the whole like this murder investigation is like a barely trucking along vibe that I feel like they were going for. Because like, especially considering the game's scope is very small. Like, you're in a very small district, and you need to wait like 2 full days in order to even see like half of the map. I feel like the whole like intentional like stalling there is just kind of unnecessary after a certain point. But yeah, I don't know if that's like explaining myself super well, but that's just how I feel personally, because the whirling in rags is like 90% of the investigation. So then something I don't like is this isn't actually part of the game at all. This is more like part of the community, but like that kind of is it as far as like my criticisms of the game go. So you can click off, I guess, if you're not interested in me like complaining more. But Joyce's whole quote about how like capitalism has the power to subsume all criticisms of itself within itself. Those who would critique capital end up reinforcing it instead. That's a paraphrase. That's basically what she said. In isolation, that quote is completely fine. It makes complete sense. It's like a pretty intelligent. I mean, it's not like a crazy like elucidating thing to say. I don't really want to say it's like ultra intelligent. It's like the ways that you can analyze it are, but it's like a pretty simple like observation to make, because like, yeah, there are a lot of very anti-capitalist like franchises that are franchises. Like, they get bought and used by people who only want to make money, despite the fact that like on the surface, when you look at those works and their messages, they're very anti-capital. Like, there's a lot of hypocrisy there. A lot of like things that are made in good faith end up only being made to like perpetuate capitalism, stuff like that. Like, that makes perfect sense. But the thing is, in the context, Joyce says that when not when like she's making this like enlightened critique of capitalism and its critiques. She's making it specifically to criticize Cindy the Skull, the really poor in a gang street artist who makes $0 or zero real, I guess, like criticizing capital at all. She's not like part of some like organization that is like making millions of dollars, or like any substantial amount of money at all, like being an anti-capitalist. She's literally just like a poor street rat, basically. And I don't say that like as a means to disparage her at all. Like, it's not really her fault she's in that position. But like, Joyce is literally just like calling her a hypocrite, saying she lives in a fantasy world, by thinking that she's like outside of the system by like criticizing it. That's what Joyce is saying. Like, you literally have to prompt her to talk about Cindy as a whole, and then she goes into it. So I really don't think that Joyce, like, first of all, I think that Joyce is an intelligent character, but in that like optional conversation that you can have with her where she brings that up, it's like, it's not very intelligent of her to say. She's just insulting some like gang member who is really poor, as if she's being a hypocrite for being an anti-capitalist in an anti-capitalist society. Like, I actually do think it's as simple as her doing the whole, I see that you're criticizing society, but you exist in a society meme. Like, it basically is that, but whatever. And like, again, the ways that people analyze the quote are very like intelligent a lot of the time, even though it's still like not that crazy in my opinion. But yeah, I just feel like a lot of people kind of like miss the fact that Joyce is just being stupid there, but whatever. Again, not like a problem with the game. Having flawed characters is good, but yeah. And yeah, and my only other criticism is that the Switch version of the game, which is the one that I have, is absolutely terrible. It crashes all the time. And yeah, I don't really like that. So, okay, bye, video over.